Hi everybody, my name is Louise and I'm from Dietitian's Life, and I am with Sophie today, who is a gastro dietitian, and she has a very keen interest in sourdough bread and the health benefits of it.
Hi Louise, thanks for having me.
No problem. So do you want to tell us a little bit about sourdough? Why is it different to normal bread?
Okay, so our normal bread is made with fast-acting yeast and has different things added to it to get the fluffiness. Essentially the fast-acting yeast breaks down all the components in the flour and reduces carbon dioxide, which gives us a nice fluffy bread. And it's made very quickly. It takes about 3 hours to make a loaf, from combining the flour ingredients to getting the full loaf in the bag in the factory. So this all started in about 1960s, and before that people were actually making their breads either at home or buying it from a bakery, and they were making it in the sourdough way. So essentially your sourdough starts with a starter, and I've got one in my little pot here. As you can see, it's quite liquidy, quite runny, and smells nice and vinegary. So essentially what's in here is wild yeast that was used, but also lactic acid bacteria. Essentially they work together to break down the flour into different components, and again give that rise when they're cooking and making the bread. So you end up with a little less fluffy bread, but it's definitely a lovely traditional taste, very artisan, and people are getting to know the taste of sourdough breads now because they are available in shops.
Yes, I was going to say, do you have to make it yourselves, or can you buy it?
So there are some available in shops, and actually a lot of bread manufacturers are adding dried sourdough into bread products. So you get the artisan type of breads nowadays that have it in the ingredients as a sort of a dried powder into the normal flour, and then it's grown with fast acting yeast again, just to give it a bit of flavour of the artisan. But there are lots of proper sourdoughs in shops available in supermarkets now. So I've got one here which is lovely and spongy, and again not very sour tasting because not everybody likes the sour taste, people prefer the milder taste. And there are quite a few now in supermarkets which are sourdough breads, or they're either actually written on the back that it's long fermented. So they're not written sourdough because the word sourdough puts people off, but it's long fermented, so therefore it's the same process.
Mm-hmm. So what are the health benefits then of sourdough versus kind of normal yeast?
Okay, so we've had a very interesting study published recently, not myself, that I've read about, that actually the gluten is broken down in sourdough in the process of making the bread. So actually for those people who can't tolerate gluten very well, such as patients with non-celiac gluten sensitivity, these sorts of breads might actually be easier for them to digest, and maybe they reduce the bloating that they have after fast-acting yeast bread.
So it sounds like it could be beneficial for some types of patients, or for some people.
Yeah, I see lots of patients in my clinic with irritable bowel syndrome, and they sometimes start what's called a low FODMAP diet as well. And when they follow this diet, they often choose a gluten-free bread. So a lot of them find that it helps them as well reduce some of the bloating issues. And actually in Australia they've tested sourdough breads for the fructan content, so that's also lowered in low FODMAPs, and they found that sourdough bread is lower in fructans as well, so it's better tolerated.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about fructans? What does that mean? What does the word fructan mean?
So fructans are carbohydrates found in wheat flour in particular, and they are integral to the parts of the flour that we use to make breads and cakes and biscuits with, and they can be broken down in food manufacturing and food processes to make it into smaller components. So the fructan is a large carbohydrate, and it's broken down into disaccharides or even glucose molecules, which are simple sugars.
And why are fructans potentially a problem to us?
So fructans can be a problem in some patients because when they eat the full fructans, it gets digested down by our gut bacteria, and that's when the symptoms of bloating can happen, when there's lots of gases that are released and they accumulate in the large bowel, and that's why some people feel very bloated with fructans.
So it'd be beneficial to have this bread which is lower in fructans and lower in gluten as well.
I think it would suit a lot of people, and a lot of people, once they get used to the tastes of them, will actually enjoy them even more than yeast risen bread.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So what have you got on the table? What other things have you got here?
Alright, so I've got different forms of baguettes here. So French baguettes are made with sourdough, and again a little bit of yeast used, but generally not many other ingredients apart from flour, water, the sourdough starter and the yeast. So I've made a couple of sourdough. So once you're making it at home, all you have to do is get your sourdough starter ready, and then you've got lots and lots of recipes online where you can follow and make really nice breads at home if you want to do that. And then also I've got some sweet breads as well, so it's not just savoury breads that have the same manufacturing process, they're the same starter. They're actually nice sweet brioches as well, and some croissants over here as well that have been made with French butter, and the French butter's got lactic acid bacteria in it because they're cultured butters, and they're allowed to rest for 7 hours, and again that starts the fermentation process off as well. So there are more and more products available in the shops now. The best one that I found at the moment in the shops is the sourdough breadcrumb Kievs as well. So even chicken Kievs are used with the breadcrumb coating, which they used to use in the old days.
Yeah, well, how do you know that that was specifically with sourdough?
So if it isn't written on the ingredients on the back, it usually is, but if it isn't, then it usually has a description on the label itself about what's happened to the product. So it usually says a long fermentation time, or a fermentation time of 12 hours, or sometimes it specifies and sometimes it doesn't. Obviously there needs to be a bit of legislation to clarify what can be written on packaging.
Great. And I was just thinking about the French loaf bread. If I went into one of the big supermarkets and just picked a French loaf off the shelf, would that be made the original way?
So lots of the baguettes that are sold in supermarkets are called French sticks, and there's a reason for that. Because the baguettes are made in a specific way in France, and they're actually trying to get hold of UNESCO heritage for those baguettes. So the ones that they sell in the French sticks are made with fast-acting yeast, exactly the same way as our loaves are. But it's the sourdough baguettes that they sell in supermarkets now that are definitely made the traditional way.
Yeah, so not the usual one you pick up the shelf. You need to look for the...
Yeah, it's usually again written on the labels, so it's worth checking, or asking the baker as well, because often they have a little bakery section in the supermarket, and you can always ask them which products are suitable.
So what have we got here, Sophie?
So this is a pizza made with sourdough bread as well. So people in Italy, they enjoyed their pizza for all these years, and it was all made using sourdough bases, and before fast-acting yeast came about as well. But luckily now in England we do have some available in supermarkets. So again, if you're not used to the taste of artisan bread, then pizza's a good place to start, or focaccia or ciabatta, because they naturally have a bit more extra flavours going on that you might be able to enjoy, as well as the acidity of the sourdough bread.
Great. So can you give me a step-by-step guide of how you make this lovely looking big starter you've got here?
Yeah, absolutely. Essentially it is flour and water, but it does depend on the ratios that you use. So there's lots of recipes online to get you started again, and the good idea is just to give yourself time over a weekend just to experiment and try different ones out. So this is just an equal, I've put three, again it's American measures, so I've put 3/4 of a cup of flour plus 2 tablespoons of flour, and then half a cup of water, and you just give it a really good mixer, and then you can either cover it with a cloth or leave it out in the air to trap the bacteria, or also just using the yeast and bacteria that's naturally in the flour, and then you leave that to ferment for 12 hours, and then the next day then you have to feed it. So you give it more flour and more water, give it a good mix, and then each day you feed it with more flour until the bacteria is enough to start making the bubbles of carbon dioxide on the surface, and that's when you see that your starter's active. So after about 5 days, then it's usually ready to use.
And it seems a lot of work to be making your own bread all the time. Have you got any tips of how we could fit it into our lives if that's what we want to do.
Yeah, so many people keep their sourdough starter away, so you can either pop it in the fridge when you're not using it, and then you just have to take it out of the fridge and revive it, give it more food. So if you're making a bread at the weekends, for example, you take your sourdough starter out of the fridge on Thursday evening, feed it, get it ready until by Saturday morning it should be ready to use again so you can bake. So that's a nice easy way to get around that. But also, you know, I found that it's a little bit like a pet. Every time I feed my cat, I feed my starter. So once you get into the routine of it, then it's quite nice to be able to just keep it going. And I've made bread with it, and I've made muffins with it, and you can make pancakes with it. There's lots of other things that you can make, not just bread.
Great. Yeah, and when I've tried some, I've actually only been to the supermarket because Sophie told me which supermarkets to go to try the bread, and it's quite filling as well, isn't it? Because it is that little bit more denser. Yeah. It's quite filling when you're eating it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're just new to the bread as well, it's worth trying it as toast first, and that way it gets you used to the taste before you get used to the textures.
Yeah, great. So don't disregard bread. Sometimes bread gets a bad name, doesn't it? Carbohydrates gets a bad name, but actually this type of bread is pretty good for you, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think, you know, let's fall back in love with bread again and enjoy this one.
Yeah, back to the old ways.
Absolutely.
Yes, rather than the new kind of processed bread. Yeah.